Right off the bat, you're going to hear me refer to my guest as a retired educator. Jennifer Hogan was a retired educator when she and I talked, and she told me off air that she was considering getting back into it. Well, she did. And I am thrilled for the teachers and the children and their families because you're going to hear how thoughtful and compassionate and human Jen is. Her topic is one that is so familiar to many leaders. Let me put it this way. We all talk about grit or resilience, and the truth is, grit is learned through experience. We all begin our leadership roles with a lack of experience, so we lead with our hearts. When we look back, we're glad we led with our hearts, and we realize how much we've learned. Experiences build resilience. Thanks for tuning in. Today on An Imperfect Leader, Jennifer Hogan is my guest. Jennifer is a retired educator, having served different roles throughout her 27-year career. And she's been a teacher and a coach and an administrator, and she is passionate about leadership, about culture, and teaching and learning. And she's the creator of the Compelled Educator, which helps teachers and leaders find meaningful resources for personal and professional well-being, growth, and development. Jennifer, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Thank you, Peter. I'm so excited to be here. I'm completely humbled and can't wait to have this conversation.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you here. So, I discovered the Compelled Educator website and the blog many months ago and have been really looking forward to this conversation. In fact, one of your recent blog posts was about Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead, and it was just so moving. You wrote, "While it can be very hard to do, it's important for leaders to connect with our own emotions as well as the emotions of those we lead." Brene describes armored leadership versus daring leadership, which consists of dichotomies such as being a knower and being right versus being a learner and getting it right, and rewarding exhaustion as a status symbol and attaching productivity to self-worth, oh my gosh, versus modeling rest, play, and recovery. So many school and district leaders endlessly struggle with that dichotomy. And I was such a victim of rewarding exhaustion as a status symbol. The end of the day would come, and the end of the week would come, and the end of the year would arrive, and I would be tired, exhausted, completely spent. And for some reason, I thought this was what made a good leader. What is a piece of advice that you give leaders stuck in this cycle?
I think it's important to recognize that we're in that cycle and really to not play the victim and think that it has to continue to be this way. When you know that you can break free from it and understand the importance of rest and recovery. There's that old saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. That is so true. And leaders need to have a full cup in order to empower others and lead organizations. So we need to admit that it's a challenge, and we need to tell ourselves, you can do hard things. And that means learning to say no and to set boundaries. So with technology and the ability to be connected 24/7, it's important to establish those boundaries and keep them, such as no texting or emailing or calls after a certain time, or no cell phones during meals. I know when I was growing up, my parents didn't answer the phone on the wall during a meal. And so I think that's something really good to continue. And then also maybe cut out the cell phone use at least 30 minutes before bedtime. It can look different for each person, and learning to say no, it's also a way to keep your actions aligned with your values. For instance, I choose 3 words every year to help keep me grounded and focus on my actions throughout the year. So find a way to know what your values are, say no, set boundaries. And also, I'd like to say that sometimes this comes from comparing ourselves to others. We look at other people's achievements and feel like we need to do more. So instead of recognizing that each person has their own unique contribution to the world, we're ending up comparing ourselves. And so if it's creating great stress and anxiety too, I always advise you could reach out to a professional and have some talks about those things. But it's really about knowing yourself and knowing what you value and doing the things that align with your values.
I wonder, first of all, I do appreciate you teaching me a new term or an axiom of you can't pour from an empty cup.
Mhm.
I had an amazing mentor and principal when I taught in Oakland, California, and when I was an assistant principal for her, and she said you can't help kids if you're dead. So I like your pour from an empty cup a little bit better. But Ina Harris was amazing. But it was true. I would drag my body. We all drag our bodies into work when we're educators. It seems like that is one profession, that and probably nurses and social workers as well. We drag ourselves in with this idea that we're supposed to serve even though we are empty. And she would say, honey or sugar, you can't serve kids if you're dead. So I do like, you can't pour from an empty cup. I do wonder, specifically for women and women leaders, how difficult it might be. And I say this for women because it's from what I've read, it's more difficult to say no when you are asked to take on additional responsibilities. It seems that appears to be within our profession something, and probably all. And I wonder what kind of advice do you give to those leaders who are constantly being asked to take on additional responsibilities, and how hard it is to say no? What advice do you provide for them on how to say no?
It is very hard, I think, because we are in the service profession and we feel that need to continue to say yes in order so that we can serve others. And I think sometimes too, we feel like we have to give a reason along with our no. It's not enough just to say no. There are phrases that could be used when you're saying no. And I think one thing we have to ask ourselves, how does this serve me when I'm serving others? Is it going to fill your cup? Is it going to make you stronger and a better leader? If it's just going to drain you, if it's a bucket drainer instead of a bucket filler, I think it's okay to say no, and it's okay just to give a no. Just like Brene Brown says, clear is kind. It's okay to just come right out and say, I'm not able to do that at that time. I'll have a previous engagement, and your previous engagement might be with yourself. It might be self-care, but it's okay just to say no without a qualifier.
In the leadership model that I use to advise others, there's a dimension. It's called collective aspiration. And that's really the heart of an organization's work. And inside that dimension is a term, moral focus. And this can be the reason why an organization exists. And for leaders, it's why we get up in the morning. My moral focus has been to end poverty wherever I can. This idea that I was born with blessings and I have a responsibility to share those blessings with others. My moral focus can also include those core values. And mine are actually in Hebrew. They are mitzvah, simcha, tzedakah, and shalom. Mitzvah being good deeds, simcha, which is actually my Hebrew name, which means joy, tzedakah, which means justice, but also means charity, and then shalom for peace. And you yourself have written about core values in a Compelled Educator, and you wrote, by identifying your values, you can align your actions with your beliefs, make better decisions, and live a more fulfilling life. What are your core values, and how did you arrive at them?
So I'm going to share 5 core values with you. One is curiosity. And that means wisdom and learning and creativity. I am constantly asking questions and seeking out wisdom. I don't want to say knowledge, but I want to have the discernment with the wisdom. Perseverance is another one. And I think that comes from my athletic background and performance desires. But I've always believed in a strong work ethic. And so perseverance is another core value. Kindness is another core value. And I just mentioned Brene Brown, clear is kind. And I've learned to embrace that. So I always would want someone to walk away from a conversation or an interaction with me and think that was really kind. Integrity is really a huge, important core value for me. And that includes justice and equity. And my dad taught me a saying growing up, and it was, you got to treat everyone the same, but different. And I learned a lot from that. And so integrity is really, really important to me. But then the last one that I want to share with you is balance. And I don't mean that I do everything the same amount in terms of work, personal and professional, but I want to make sure that my actions align with my values so that I'm giving enough time to each action or each aspect of my life that I do feel in balance.
When you're helping others identify their values, because clearly you have 5 distinct values that really speak to the whole person that is you, what are some ways that you help others identify their core values?
I think it's important to start with self-reflection. So what are your achievements? What are your failures? What have you learned from those failures? Think about your relationships, the people who are important to you, and goals that you may have for yourself, whether professional or personal. So really self-reflection is key. And that might be done through just quiet time, journaling, writing, blogging. There are all kinds of ways for self-reflection. I think too, ask, who do you admire and why do you admire them? What are those qualities that they have that cause you to admire them? I think too, think about a time where you had an emotional response. Think of times that you stood up for someone or something or a situation. You spoke out, you felt something very deeply. That can help identify those core values in yourself. And then another way to do it is to look at a list of core values and sort of rank them, narrow them down. When you rank them, there's some that immediately you can probably cross off from your list. And then as you start to narrow it down to 3 to 5 core values, it gets very, very challenging. And you really do go through that self-reflection process to determine what those core values are. So those are some great ways to identify core values. There are assessments that are available online. I talk about some of these in my blog post. I hope you'll share that link in the show notes. But I think such importance for leaders to know themselves first, because you got to lead yourself before you can lead others.
Jennifer, I'd like to ask you the question I ask of every guest who comes on the podcast. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate with you?
You know, being a leader is full of dichotomies. You feel the expectation to have all the answers, yet at the same time, you know that the smartest person in the room is the room. You have to be cautious as well as courageous. You look to be innovative, yet hold tight to tradition and ways of doing things. And you want to be strong, yet vulnerable. You know, the one thing that is constant is change. And there's never perfection when there's change and you're having to adapt. A phrase that I often say to my family is, it's all about the journey and not the destination. So relating to that phrase, a perfect leader feels like a destination, where embracing that imperfect leader is more about the journey and the process. And when we recognize that we're all imperfect leaders, it creates an opportunity to embrace our strengths as well as our weaknesses, and to lean on others and grow ourselves and our teams.
And we'll be right back. An Imperfect Leader is underwritten in part by the Waters Center for Systems Thinking. Founded by Jim and Faith Waters, the Waters Center for Systems Thinking is an organization dedicated to helping individuals and institutions design systems to help them make more thoughtful decisions. Check out the Waters Center for Systems Thinking at their website, waterscenterst.org. Hello, Imperfect Leaders. I am so excited. My new book, An Imperfect Leader, Human-Centered Leadership in After Action, is now available. You can order it by going to Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I've seen it online in lots of bookstores. Thank you so much for your support. We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader, called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. And my guest is Jennifer Hogan. She is the creator of the Compelled Educator, which helps teachers and leaders find meaningful resources for both personal and professional well-being, growth, and development. In this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision that they had to make, and then we discuss it. So Jennifer, what happened?
So during my 27-year career as an educator, I spent 2 years as a principal, and those were in years 14 and 15. So when I went into that role, I was an assistant principal in a nearby high school, very happy at that school, and got a call out of the blue to come and interview to be a principal, and was offered the job and accepted it. And going into that role, when I had been a young teacher and coach, when I was an assistant principal, I had chosen not to get involved in politics, whether through coaching or in a school. And I thought just being a good person with good intentions and a strong work ethic good morals. I thought that was enough. And I underestimated the knowing and participating in the power and the politics of a school or district. So as an assistant principal, I just aspired to, serve all staff members, ignore the politics of the school and the community. I didn't know how to grow my influence or use my influence. And so when I moved into that principal position, I worked for a superintendent who had tremendous political skill, just a genius. And she used informational power as well as other types of power to influence those within the school system and community. And one example of informational power that I'll share is that as a principal, I was asked not to communicate with board members. All of the principals in the district were asked not to communicate with board members. She would do the communicating. And I had a backstage pass to hear the leader behind closed doors, and I recognized the resulting use of power in negative ways. And I saw manipulation. I felt the dissatisfaction that comes from coercive power. And there were other central office employees who were manipulative at times and sometimes undermined my actions and decisions. I went into this very naive. Personally, I had only received positive feedback about my work, about my decisions and my actions and ideas. But during those 2 years, it felt like nothing I did was quite good enough for those in the central office or for the board president. And I ended up resigning after the second year because of the stress that I was under and for my core value of integrity not being aligned with my actions nor those in the central office, frankly. And it took me many years of forgiving and letting go of the resentment that I felt. And I learned the importance of not detaching from the politics in an organization, but to understand them, to value them, to build strong relationships with all stakeholders. So since then, throughout the rest of my career, I have valued politics and power, and I've used them in ways that align with good character and that align with my core values.
So first of all, I would say you used a phrase as you were leading into this about when I asked you about an imperfect leader, and you said it's all about the journey and not the destination. And it sounds like there was some really great learning in terms of your own sort of experience that at one point it may have been that the thought was the destination is a principalship. Not that you were seeking it out, they sought you and you accepted it. And yet, as you were telling this experience, which all too often is something we hear about in terms of how one consolidates power, that really a takeaway was, the experience, the journey was in its own right a great lesson in learning in terms of who you are. And so many of us find ourselves in positions and we find ourselves battling this idea that if we were to step away from a certain position, that in some way it defines us. And I really think that you showed incredible courage to do something like that. One of the questions I ask leaders as they join the podcast is to sort of speak to what was overlooked. And as you were describing your scenario, it appears that a piece that was overlooked is this idea that there is a power dynamic between the superintendent and central office as a whole, as an entity, and the principals in terms of this hierarchy. I don't believe that they are below, that there is this sort of dynamic. Principals, particularly high school principals, have a great deal of influence. And so by cutting that off, it appears that you lose in terms of your ability to really influence change within a school system. Would you say that was the biggest piece that was overlooked in terms of this experience for you?
Absolutely. I think that's part of it. I think too, understanding the politics and power that are in play within a school, from department chairs or veteran teachers or teachers who are doing creative things in their classrooms. Different people hold different types of influence within a school, as well as that power that you talked about between a superintendent and a principal. So I think it's important to recognize it across the board of the situations that happen in a school are never without influence, politics, and power.
What did you learn about relationships, or what new relationships were formed?
I think it's important to build stronger relationships. I think it's important to something that I didn't do up to that point was let people in. I think that, I was a college athlete, and I was a pitcher, a softball pitcher, and that required a certain amount of being stoic on the mound. And I think that's something that translated into me as a person. And so I learned through this experience to let people in more and get to know me quicker and sooner and more about me, understand the way that I do things and the way that I process and the way that I think, and just more personally. And so I think through all of this, it really helped me to build stronger relationships. And I would also say that I've lived my life in a way that I don't think that anything happens accidentally. I don't believe in coincidences. I think it all happens for a reason. And so when I left that principalship, I went back to the classroom for 2 years at Hoover High School. And it was during that time that I had a student in my classroom that I basically saved his life. He brought a loaded gun to school in his backpack, and he trusted me to tell me about it. And I felt like I was there for a reason. And I knew that it all unfolded the way that it was supposed to, according to what I believe in my faith. And so I never looked back with any sort of reason to question how that had all unfolded. I knew that I needed to go through that fire to get to the other side, but then also to have the successful career after that, and understand that those 2 years were just a part of my journey.
What frustrated you?
What frustrated me is that my integrity was questioned during those 2 years. I had never faced that before. I was not prepared for that. That was the frustrating part, and not speaking up for myself more. Looking back, I wish I had been more of an advocate for myself.
It is very clear from our conversation that you are such a reflective person. Everything on the Compelled Educator also speaks to how one needs to be mindful and thoughtful about their actions, and what does that mean, and how it defines you, and then how will your beliefs translate into positive action for others. And so I was kind of curious, what could you have done differently? And it sounds like what you're saying is standing up for yourself. What does that look like?
That looks like, speaking up and sharing what I believe, or coming right out and saying, you're questioning my integrity, and I want to make sure that you understand where I'm coming from. Just being clear, stating my beliefs, stating what's going on in my head. I'm very much a rule follower. And so I was also told that I wasn't insubordinate by any means, but I was told that I wasn't building strong enough relationships with central office employees, or sort of following what they had expected, which was so anti me, because I am such a rule follower and want to please and do the right thing. So there you go.
Boy, it really speaks to the kind of toxic culture that can exist in an organization when there is this, it's almost like this cycle, right? You're told that you are not a team player, and then you shift or change some of your habits, but it doesn't really fit into who you are and what you believe. And then you may shut down, and then that only fuels this idea that you're not part of the team, and you're not building the kind of relationships you need to be building. And then you've got your teachers asking you, hey, could you be our voice with central office and with the board, and yet you're being told, actually, I wish I could, but I can't. But yet you can't tell your teachers that, because that's not considered being a team player. What a difficult position you found yourself in.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was kind of like what you're talking about. It was a kind of a vicious cycle, and caught in the middle. Yeah, not a good one. I will say this too, that at the time, this is 2007 to 2009. So this is right when Apple iPhone came out. This is, pre-social media. Social media was just starting, and I was not a connected educator during this time. And so a lot of what happened, I simply internalized. I didn't talk about it with anybody. I didn't know who I could trust. And since then, and becoming a connected educator, I've been amazed of the people who have gone through similar situations. And I've learned so much from other people who are doing leadership roles in their schools or in their district. It's just been incredible. And being a connected educator has changed me both personally and professionally. I'm so appreciative of that. And I wish that I had had that then, because it may have turned out differently.
So I wonder if you would take this last question that I ask of our guests and speak to what it means to be a connected educator. So in the end, what was something that was good that came out of this situation? Because it does appear that returning to the classroom, being there for children, particularly the child who you just described, whose life could have been completely different had it been a different adult in their life, and then finding the connected educator, and then being a presence and a coach for so many teachers and leaders throughout the country. Tell us about a connected educator. What does that mean? And what does that, how has that moved you into this role as a coach?
So I think back to when I was a teacher. If I had a question or an idea or wanted to bounce something off someone, I could simply go next door. I could go to the classroom next door, talk to the teacher down the hallway. I had 100 people in the building who were doing what I was doing, who was faced with the situations, dealing with classroom management, dealing with schedule changes or something that came up or needing flexibility or whatever the situation was. I had someone to lean on that I could talk to and bounce ideas off of. When I became an administrator, it was in the building where I had taught. Okay. And it was an incredible school. It still is an incredible school. And I was very fortunate and blessed to have that opportunity and loved my time in that school. And when I became an administrator, I became the assistant principal of curriculum. The other two administrators the other two assistant principals in the building were in charge of management type tasks, for instance, discipline and textbooks and building maintenance and those sorts of things. So while there were two other assistant principals in the building, they were not doing what I was doing in terms of leading the teachers and curriculum and professional development. So my pool of people to learn from reduced greatly. So there were only a few of us in the building that I could talk to and bounce ideas off of and learn from. And so I went from that role, that was 2004 to 2007, pre-social media, became a principal, and then went back to the classroom for 2 years and then became an assistant principal for the next 10. And during that time of becoming a connected educator, I was able to build relationships with people across the country and see the ideas that they were doing on Twitter, connecting with them through Twitter. I hosted a Twitter chat once a week with another assistant principal, Holly Sutherland, and I. We hosted Alabama Ed Chat. So we had educators who showed up every Monday night at 9:00, where we asked questions and really dug deep into some topics and just learned so much during that time of hosting that Twitter chat. And I really built some strong relationships. For instance, I'll share this quick story. Back in 2017 or 18, I was hosting a Women in Ed Leadership Boxer group. And there were some ladies on the group who decided we want to put in some proposals to present at ASCD in California. And so Michelle Hill and Debbie Campbell, Lisa Dabbs, and I decided that we would present at ASCD, and we had never met each other in person. So we all planned everything online, got together and met up in California for the first time and presented together. And we're still friends to this day. And I've built some really strong relationships with people who understand the stress and what it's like to be a school leader, the challenges that we face, the struggles that we have. And so we can commiserate together and celebrate together and really move forward as we continue to grow ourselves and our schools.
You raise a really interesting point, which is that as educators in classrooms and departments, we're highly collaborative. And then for some reason, we move into leadership roles and there are fewer of us, and we're almost encouraged to work solo. We're encouraged to be collaborative with others and make decisions with others. But when you're trying to do your job, there are very few individuals within your own school district, within your own region, that you can really be collaborative with. So this idea that you have now created this incredible network of connected educators is really great advice for those who are doing this work. What advice do you give to aspiring leaders who reach out to you for coaching?
So one is know yourself. You can't lead others without leading yourself first. Know your core values, determine your personality strengths as well as your areas of growth. Sometimes we get too focused on our weaknesses and we don't celebrate our strengths enough, and we really need to do that. There are different ways to do this. The Enneagram assessment, the Myers-Briggs assessment, standout strengths. There are other personality tests. The more that you can do and really understand how those all define you as well as how they work together helps you to determine those things that are of value to you and why your personality is the way that it is. But are you a doer? Are you an idea person? Are you the person who's willing to build the plane as you fly it? Do you need all the plans laid out? I think it's just important to really, really know yourself. The second thing is, and I love to say this, dig your well before you're thirsty. So we've talked a lot about that connected educator network. Start building your network. Start meeting people and learning from others. Find those people who are doing what you want to do, people you admire. Social media is a terrific way to connect with people all over the country and world who are in leadership. And so learn from them, what they're saying, what they're doing. It's just a great opportunity to be able to dig that well before you're thirsty.
My guest again was Jennifer Hogan. She's the creator of the Compelled Educator, which helps teachers and leaders find meaningful resources for both personal and professional well-being, growth, and development. And Jennifer, this has just been terrific. In a post that you wrote in April, you spoke of mindfulness, selflessness, and compassion, and you reminded us that our world today that we're living in is a world full of distractions, and those distractions lead people away from those three traits. And so I just want to thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to be grounded once more, to learn some really new, incredible phrases, and I just love your values in terms of equity and curiosity and integrity, perseverance, and I'm missing one. I can't remember which one I'm missing, but you are such an inspiration. Thank you so much for giving us the time today.
Thank you, Peter. I really appreciate it.
Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created the Daruma doll butterfly artwork. Imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It is a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader. And I'm proud to be an imperfect leader, so I hope you'll join me next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader, Leadership in After Action.